Great. So a huge welcome today to our webinar session looking at life's changes and how we can best navigate them. So my name is Sarah Turner and I'm the Vice Chair for PRCA in the Southwest. And we came up with this idea to look at how we can really support our people, our colleagues through those difficult times in life that also bring great joy. I think that as sort of communication professionals, obviously we're always really passionate about humans, what it means to be human. And a lot of our work and a lot of value that we bring in the workplace is about having that deep understanding of human nature. So this is a chance to explore in a bit more detail life's changes, as I said. I think it's a nice time of year to be doing it. There is spring in the air. I hope you have seen daffodils around the place. There's certainly been snowdrops and they're about going over where I live. So yes, it is. Things are warming up and we're seeing lots of changes around us. So I will just invite our three speakers to introduce themselves quickly, and then I'll explain the format of the hour that we can spend together.
Hi, so my name's Olenka and I work within HR with over 15 years experience within being a strategic partner to senior leaders. We have been working in the advertising, marketing and PR industry for almost 2 years now, and I work really closely with MDs and CEOs of organizations to put in those all-important policies, procedures and best practices within the scope of work and the remit within their workplaces. And just a little bit about me, I'm extremely passionate about empowering those that I coach, focusing on solution-driven priorities that support people, growth and resilience within the workplace.
Oh, thanks, Olenka.
Hello, everybody. I'm Leanne Turner, no relation to Sarah, just pure coincidence. And it's lovely to be here today and lovely to be invited along. My background was in education sector for nearly 20 years, but I founded the charity Aching Arms in 2010 after the loss of my son. And so the charity is a pregnancy and baby loss charity, and we work nationally to support the needs of bereaved parents for as long as they need us, wherever they are, and regardless of circumstances that they faced. I'm a mum to 2 children. One is sadly not with us, my James, who we lost in 2009, and my 11-year-old son, who I'm absolutely blessed to have after a difficult fertility journey. So I'm very passionate about workplaces being caring, kind, and understanding that life is messy and life is difficult and all sorts of challenges come along. And one of them is obviously the area I work in around pregnancy and baby loss. And I'll talk to you obviously in my presentation in a lot more detail about that. But thanks for joining and lovely to be here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ed. I work within a group of care homes that are family owned. It was actually my father who set up the group back in 1986. So I've kind of grown up around elderly care, dementia, and inadvertently kind of watched the growth of dementia knowledge. I've been a carer for well, when did I start now? So 25 years I've worked within the homes as a carer and progressed on to being a nurse, and I now oversee the running of our dementia services, and I'm also studying my master's in dementia research, and have kind of just found myself focusing my studies around identity and the impact of diagnosis and how that can affect everyone around that diagnosis. But yeah, I've done all sorts of jobs within the care homes, in the kitchen, maintenance, driving the minibus. So it's literally in my veins. Yeah, I love what I do. I don't do it because I'm expected to do it. I do it because I love it. And Dad was diagnosed in June 2023 with dementia, Alzheimer's, but a specific type, focusing on atrophy in frontal lobe. So yeah, just life is rubbish sometimes, and it's just how we're trying to find our way, all of us really, whilst trying to maintain parenthood and mental health and just sanity of life. But yeah, I'm here to talk through just basically everything that we're focusing on around identity and how diagnosis impacts people in dementia.
Oh, thanks so much, all three of you. So as you can see, we've got some really amazing speakers with us. Alenka, who has a huge breadth of experience in supporting people and championing people through HR and her work. And then we're looking at sort of the beginning of life and the joys and sometimes the sadness that comes with that. And then we're looking towards the end of life with, again, the joys and sadnesses that come with that. I should just share a trigger warning. Obviously, we are going to be touching on some really challenging things today, and sadly, they are a part of life. And I also wanted to sort of share, because I will hopefully make it part of the discussion to bring it to life, and feel free you also to ask questions and join in. I am a mum of 3, and I'm currently caring for my elderly mother who's 85. And I also have my poor sister who is suffering from stage 4 cancer. So as ever, in the room, there are always lots and lots of stories. And I look after a very large comms team. And one of the real privileges of my role in leadership is really understanding who people are and supporting them through all of that. So yes, we're going to get started. We're going to have about 10 minutes discussion from each of our speakers, starting with Alenka and then Leanne and then Ed. And then I'll open it out to some questions. Obviously, we've got some real experts in the room, so you may have some questions that you'd like to ask them. And that will take us through to our end of the time together. I'm sure also, I predict that our speakers will have questions for each other, because obviously they are real experts in their own areas. Yes. Okay, I'm going to leave it to get started. So Alenka, do you want to carry on?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. So as Sarah said, life is about life. We go about it as best as we can. And as we think we're getting it right, my mum used to call them speed bumps. They would appear out of nowhere and you'd have to find your way over them. So one of the biggest things within kind of my life experiences and the stuff that I've gone through, I too unfortunately have suffered bereavement, which is, like most people unfortunately will in life, which means we have to find a way to help people navigate. And I think one of the best ways is through shared experience. So being open and honest and having conversations like this through webinars, trainings, and support mechanisms, so that we can share what we go through in life with other people and show them that true sense of empathy. And I think that's really key. It's one of the things that you try and, within HR, you try to keep the human factor within HR, human resources or people teams, keep the people forefront of your mind. But when you're looking at people and workplace scenarios, they tend to have 2 parts to themselves. You have a work part and a home part. Some people think, old school mentality, that these things should be separate, but the truth is they overlap. And we all have to recognize that within the workplace in particular, and we have to be supportive of it. So my role is to encourage the openness towards change, and that is a part of our natural lives. Every single one of us go through everything at one point or another, sometimes all together and sometimes spread across a period of time. So the workplace needs to be adaptable to accommodate all those different life stages whenever they may be. And I think that we all have a massive part to play in that support for each other. And we've looked at kind of 3 main areas of, within the workplace in particular, from an HR perspective, how can colleagues support each other? How can a manager best support? And then how does HR support you in those types of things in line with legislations and all the new changes and things that are coming up? So one of the major things is people to people. No matter whether you're a manager, colleague, or HR, it's about having that active listening. So when somebody feels like they can come to you and talk to you, that you actively listen, you're present to it, you're interested in it, you understand that level of empathy, especially if you shared experience and types of things. People feel an openness to come to you if they feel they have something in common as well. So it's sharing that vulnerability and realizing we don't need to be this facade all the time of got all my stuff together, because we're humans and we don't. And that's the reality of that. So as a colleague, it is about being present and interested in what your colleagues are saying to you. I think there's a key thing in knowing where to signpost people to. So there's the educational piece, whether it's professional services, external or internal, in kind of, again, under that shared experience point. And then speak up if anything concerns that someone is saying to you in their life changes, whether that's speak up to line managers or speaking up to HR. So from a colleague point of view, it's kind of basic human to human and just being there. From a manager, how can a manager support? I think that one of the top phrases within my industry particularly is this term psychologically safe. So to create this psychologically safe workspace for your team means that you have to have a certain level of openness and honesty. That creates a space for people to be their authentic self and to share what's going on, because a lot of the times people don't want to overlap that personal life into work because they feel and think that maybe it might interfere. Sometimes it does, well, most of the time it does interfere with work, but if your manager doesn't know what's going on, or a manager isn't there to ask the question or to notice that change in you, it kind of allows work to be interfered. And it doesn't have to be, because life happens at any point. We can't prepare for it. We think we can, but you really can't. And one of the ways that you can caveat that as a manager is about asking twice. So I went to a wonderful webinar a few months ago, which was around bereavement, and quite a subject that people don't really like to talk about. Again, one of those unexpected changes in life, but it was about suicide. And one of the speakers on there said this phrase, and it's stuck with me, and it's something that we're embedding in everything that we do, which is this ask twice. So the first time we ask, how are you? Everybody always just responds, yeah, fine, right? Because that's what we say to people. We don't want to burden people with our problems. We don't want to burden what's going on. So when you know somebody and you create that psychologically safe workspace for your team, you ask again. And that second time you're asking, you really okay? It allows more of an honest answer. Now, the first time you do it, you're probably not going to get it right, as in they're not going to feel safe to do it. But the more you ask twice, the more people will feel to open up, which is then when support and things can come in and you can be signposted to the places that you need to be, and to create an environment that we really can show that, you have that time off that you need. So when those challenges arise, you have the ability to talk about time off, or keeping in touch and having somebody go and kind of try and figure out what's going on. Or, it's about trying to get through whatever they're trying to get through without having to worry about work. So it's that awkward conversation of talking about pay. Do they get full pay? Don't they get full pay? Tell them what it is. Encourage the room to breathe in any difficult, challenging life change, which that room to breathe might be immediately as they find out about whatever the news is, or it could be in months to come. Some people, it never happens at all. They prefer to just carry on working and keep that track going. But it's for a manager to understand what that person requires in that unexpected or expected change of life, which then kind of loops in HR and how we can be there to support both manager and the person that's going through the change. And it is about, again, you'll see there's a theme here of openness. So this is the open door, right? Be that approachable person that people feel that they can come and share what they need to with you. One of the biggest things is training opportunities for line managers, training opportunities within the workplace. How can we facilitate, whether it's external or internal, to create those nuggets where people can identify that maybe they need to be asking twice, or identify something's not 100%, or training on how to deal with those difficult situations or circumstances that their teams are going through. One of the biggest things is to ensure that there's a 24-hour support. So we know that, you know, sometimes when you're looking for jobs and things like that, it's got under benefits as the employee assistance program. Should it be a benefit? No, it should be something that every organization offers as a standard these days, because you don't know what people go through, and it's a confidential line that's normally within workplace, which has really, really helped so many people that I've worked with over the years, including myself personally. And then you get to work with companies who want to be progressive in policies and foresee these types of life changes, and particularly ahead of any government changes that are top line topic and subject that's happening at the moment, like new sick pay regulations for people who, you know, might be diagnosed with some kind of terminal illness. Do you have good sick pay or long-term sick pay policies in place to support those people? The new neonatal care policy that's coming out on the 6th of April. You know, do you wait till the 6th of April? Do you put something together and get it out now? Then, of course, there's all the flexible working day, one rights for caring responsibilities, because you're caring for, you know, it's not just children, it's for anyone in your family or anyone that you have responsibility for. And then there's bereavement leave, which has been discretionary in the past, and the government are now saying, actually, this is a set amount of time that people should be having off for any kind of bereavement. So that is, you know, those are the kind of the bigger topics. And is your company ready for those types of things? Are you thinking about that in the legal way to be compliant now, because it's been seen of how important it is to actually have something more solid in place? And then is as HR, are we equipped? Do we know how best to deal with those situations to support people? Sorry, a lot of information.
No, that's absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much. I feel like I've got a real sense, and some personal tips in there as well for how I look after my team. I'm really curious, your comment about how it used to be the idea that home and work were to be kept separate, and that it was not the right thing to allow one into the other. As a busy mum of 3, I can confirm that is unachievable. So it's really heartening for me to hear that that is actually the sort of current way of thinking. And I guess it flows over into leadership as well. My examples of leadership early on in my career were not busy mums of 3. So that is very, very heartening to hear. But I wondered if you could just tell me a little bit more about that shift and what's been driving it, that to enable us to be real humans at work.
Do you know what? Personally, over the last 15 years of being in HR, and I too started with a manager who, you know, I'm mum of 2 older boys, and when I first started out, you know, I had my maternity and everything else through there, and working one day from home was so like, well, you're obviously not working, so you work your you know, behind off to prove you're working even harder at home, just to prove you could do it, because you needed to do that in that life change to be there and find that balance between mum and work and career and all that jazz. And then COVID hit, and it changed everything in the workplace. It changed the way we had to think, because we had no choice. All of a sudden, people were trusted to be at home. You know, we're adults. If you can't do your job, it's going to be picked up that you're not doing it. Whether you're doing it from the office or not, it doesn't really make much of a difference. Don't get me wrong, face-to-face time with your colleagues and all of that is really important, but it's that shift of that work-life balance has become more important to the colleague. So when they're looking for a place to work, that's something that they focus on as well. Actually, what is your policy about this? Because I am a mum, or I am a carer, or I am a person, and I don't want to work 24 hours a day in an office where it takes me 7 hours to get there, type of thing. So I think COVID, whilst it was horrendous, there was definitely some pros within, from an HR perspective in the workplace, because it forced old school mentalities to have to, that mindset shift had to happen in order for business to continue.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess as well, that loyalty that people feel when they are supported through more challenging aspects of their lives, such as small children. You stay much more loyal and much more dedicated to your industry as a whole because you feel like you can do the job. Thank you, Allegra. That was absolutely fascinating. So we're now going to. Oh, sorry, were you going to say something?
No, it's just
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I didn't want to cut you off. Lovely. So I'm now going to. So if you've got any questions, I'm going to take them at the end of the three speakers. But if you've got questions in your mind, feel free to pop them in the chat now so that we don't forget about them. And in the meantime, we're going to move on to the lovely Leanne to talk about some of the challenges around that early stage of life.
Thank you very much. Alenka, I just wanted to add, it's really interesting to hear your observations because I've been saying similarly, we're finding that some really big corporates are actually really interested for the first time in hearing about pregnancy and baby loss and wanting to get it right. And I've noticed since COVID, a big shift in this human, and I say it often in my training that particularly the insurance industry, we've had a lot of interest from them in our work because I think they finally realized they employ humans around human issues. And I think COVID brought bereavement and death and life threatening and disease and fear to every single person. And every business had to take responsibility for individuals, their safe space. And there were so many thousands of people who sadly died that there were so many thousands of businesses affected. They couldn't step away, and it's brought it into the psyche. I think, the very British stiff upper lip, brush things under the carpet was exposed. And I felt there's been a very, really positive shift within different industries to happily talk about bereavement. Obviously, that's my area, but also other life challenges because they value the person they employ. And it's just no getting away from it. So I agree, it's brought a changing landscape. So it's good to hear it because that was my feel that we were getting. So good to hear it from an expert such as yourself. Folks, I've got a presentation because I just love to show our teddy bears and the work that we do. You have to see it. You can't just hear me talk about them. So I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully that works okay, if I can get this right. Okay. Start this slideshow. Yeah. Is that okay? Everyone can see that? Yeah. Okay. So it's always a privilege for me to speak about Aching Arms, the charity that I founded, as I mentioned, in memory of my son James. So this is James's legacy. And yeah, I'm going to talk to you all about how we bring comfort after pregnancy and baby loss. So Aching Arms, we're a small national charity, and we give out little comfort bears, as you can see in that picture. And the idea, we have the comfort bears, and we also have a support service called Supporting Arms. And these little teddy bears, they go out, they're a gift from one family to another. They're not memory bears. They are used as a mental health and well-being tangible object, really. And the idea is that midwives and nurses, they offer the bears to bereaved parents who are in their care, and they use that teddy bear to have the really difficult conversations that bereavement midwives and nurses need to have around what happens next after you leave hospital, and an acknowledgement that you're not alone. So the little bear has in that photo, you can't see it, but you'll see in a moment, has a little label attached to it. It has the name of the baby in whose memory the bear has been gifted, and it has signposts to our support services so that families, if they throw away every piece of paperwork that they're given in hospital, they're unlikely to throw away that teddy, so they will have a lifeline to where they can access support. We also have our support service, like I mentioned. There's no gestational limits, there's no circumstances. We cover all, regardless of circumstance, how long ago the loss was, how recent the loss was. We're there. If parents or their families' arms ache for a baby that has died, we're there to support them for as long as they need us. We also do, as I said, I worked in the education sector, so I'm very passionate about training. And one of our charitable objectives is education and raising awareness, both within health professionals and beyond the health professionals in the workplace. So we provide guidance, advice, and training on policy and the skill sets that Alenka has just described around sensitive communication. And just to expand on what you said, Alenka, the question we encourage people to ask, how are you today? So, because I can remember going back to work and someone saying to me, how are you? And it just triggered a whole level of, you really don't want to, like in my head, you really don't want to know how I'm feeling. I'm feeling absolutely devastated and bereft, and I don't want to be here, and my baby has died, and I'm, just was this spiral of trigger. But when someone says, how are you today? You're in that moment and you can say, today's an okay day. Yesterday was really hard, but today I'm okay. So I'm just going to get through that. So that's a really nice narrow way to narrow the thinking, to you're not over processing too much about how are you is a big question. And absolutely, how are you really today, and looking for those subtleties. That's something I completely endorse, that thinking and that compassion in the workplace. So just to give you the knowledge, if you're not aware, why charities like Aching Arms are needed. That's very sadly, every day in the UK, 15 babies die before, during, or soon after birth, and 1 in 4 pregnancies end in miscarriage. You've got whole circumstances around ectopic pregnancy, molar pregnancies, terminations for medical reasons, families who may, due to social services, have their baby taken from them, babies who die suddenly, unexpectedly, babies who die in surrogacy, so a couple who've also bereaved, an adoption that fails. There's a whole range of factors around parenting. We go into parenting and the journey, a journey towards parenthood, with such hope and optimism, and we see so many thousands of families and our friends around us who may have a smooth journey. But it's not always that case, and the statistics are quite high. 1 in 6 couples will struggle to fall pregnant. And there will be people in your workplaces and in your lives, and maybe yourselves, who find themselves childless, not by choice, through circumstance, and whether that is after the loss of a baby, or whether it's a journey for medical reasons, other health conditions that they didn't become parents, and they grieve that loss of that future dream. So a lot of us go into this, I know I did, and skipped along to our scan at 21 weeks, thinking I'm going to find out if I'm having a boy or a girl, only to find that our baby was very poorly and had a very serious condition. So it is a positive, and I don't want to be negative, but we have to, in our workplaces, when you're working with hundreds of families and hundreds of colleagues and people, the thought that 1 in 4 pregnancy ends in miscarriage, it's a subject we can't not think about and talk about. So we know it has significant impact, and the research shows that women who experience stillbirth, miscarriage, or ectopic pregnancy are higher risk of post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, and depression than those who haven't. There's a real gap of knowledge and information around men's experiences, but that's a piece of work we're actually focused on. We've got a big focus at the moment around dads' experiences and the lack of support for them, and how difficult it is for them to seek help and find the right place for them. But there's a really interesting report, Out of Mind, Out of Sight. If any of you are interested in reading that, it's got lots of, and some of my stats I'll go on to in a minute are in that report, looking at directly what was happening in the workplace. So we've got some interesting statistics here. 9 months after pregnancy loss, 18% of women met the criteria for post-traumatic stress, 17 for moderate to severe anxiety, 6 for moderate to severe depression, 68% of mothers and 44% of partners reporting 4 or more negative psychological symptoms at 10 days, and 9 months later, the figures still being significant. We've got 40 to 50% of partners experience depression. This is not just about the woman or birthing person. This is about both partners, and workplaces need to acknowledge that policies can't just be it can't just be seen as women's health issue, because this is pregnancy and baby loss is not just a women's health issue. It's much broader than that. And then also it impacts the workplace. You've got 10% of bereaved parents will remain off work for 6 months. And then there's I know myself, I was off work for 4 months. When I came back to work, I had a gradual, really supportive employer who brought me back gradually over a phased return. But I still know I was not at my full productivity for another year. But they supported me through that and made allowances, and because they were compassionate and understanding that I'd been through a very, very significant trauma in having lost James at 5 months of pregnancy. So Aching Arms, the work that we do, just to let you know, we have our little bears that go out to 195 hospitals across all 4 nations of the UK. We post out, also post bears directly to families. In the last year, we gave out around 8,000 bears to families. Some will have been recently bereaved, some will be much longer ago. And Ed, it will be interesting to pick up on what you say, because there's a piece of work we'd like to do around, we have had our bears go to some care homes where we know that women in particular is the piece of work we've seen around that trauma of going back to a past trauma in a generation where they were told to just go home from hospital and have another baby. Thank goodness that thinking has changed. But it'd be interesting to pick up with you around what you're seeing, you know, in dementia care for those who have experienced a pregnancy and baby loss in a generation where it was very suppressed, talking about it. So we have our support service, just to carry on, we have our support service, and we would like to be and do more work, be an extension to the EAP. You know, Alenka talked about EAP services, which is really important. But often you will in most sort of packages of EAP, you'll get 3 calls with a generalist counsellor. We want to make the case for that we could be your specialist EAP. So you know that there's a colleague of yours, one of you in your team, who has gone through pregnancy and baby loss, and actually let's get them specialised support from an organisation like Aching Arms. And we'd like to be part of that work going forward. We do awareness training with hospitals. We don't tell midwives and nurses how to do their job. We're not clinicians, and we're not, that's not our message. It's around understanding the experiences of being a bereaved person in that space, and how with good hospital care, it can set you up for finding the right support when you go out of hospital and leave hospital and go back home. We do the workplace bereavement advice and consultancy to help training, and advocate to the government through different networks around improved bereavement care. So we're not just about teddy bears. There's a lot of work we do beyond the bear, but the bear is the physical comfort after loss. It's got the message of support from one bereaved family to another, so you know you're not alone. And that isolation of being a remote worker, you know, and imagine there's probably a few people, or a lot of you on this call, who work from home, maybe individually, independent, your own self-employed businesses, feeling so alone. If you can just get a small lifeline from our charity so that you know that you're not alone, that's our mission. It also, as I said, it gives the little label you can see in the pictures there. It gives you a link without just being another piece of paperwork that you can't even comprehend in your fog of grief. And it doesn't attract unwanted questions, because people collect teddy bears. Then it's not unusual to be a teddy bear collector. So you have one in your house or your home, or you have it with you on your desk at work. It's not pink, it's not blue, it's not baby colours, the ribbons. They're particularly green for that purpose. So you can talk about your pregnancy and your baby if you wish to, or you can just have that comforter there and that knowledge you've got a little comforter with you, which gives you strength in the day. So we say it's not just a bear. This is a beautiful quote from a parent. It's not a bear. It's like someone walking up to you, holding your hand through your darkest days. I treasure my bear. It brings a kind of comfort that no one else can. And then I've already mentioned some of these. I'll whiz through this. You know, I aim to give out 10 teddy bears 15 years ago when I founded the charity to my local hospital. And we have since then given out over 50,000 bears and brought a lot of comfort to lots of people. And we've got a great network of volunteers, about 145, mostly bereaved parents, who prepare the teddies, take them to the hospital, hand them over with little handwritten labels, and build something positive from their loss. And we have workplaces that actually do our volunteering for us. So we have workplaces where their team prepares the bears for their local hospital. So it's something that you might think about as interesting for you to get involved with. And then I just want to quickly capture this for you. I'm just conscious of time, and some things for you to think about. These are the definitions of a miscarriage, stillbirth, and neonatal death. We know there's other types of loss, as I've mentioned, And there's big changes, as Alenka was mentioning. You know, the Employment Rights Bill are currently discussing and close to bringing in a leave for every loss. So that means pre-24 weeks, where I'm hoping that this changes, because to date, I've been going to businesses and saying, yes, I'm sure you've got legislative leave for post 24 weeks, so from stillbirth onwards, but it's at your discretion as an employer whether you put in any leave allowance for someone who has a loss pre-24 weeks. It goes down as sick leave unless your employer has a compassionate policy. And these have been coming out recently, in recent years. I know my leave, I was, like I said, back in 2009, I was 4 months off work. My employer put it down as pregnancy-related leave so that it didn't go on my record as being sick leave. So I'm hoping the new Employment Rights Bill, we're all hoping, and we stand with the Miscarriage Association on this, that there's some acknowledgement that you have to do something for these mothers and fathers who experience a loss pre-24 weeks that isn't sick leave, because then you're not sick. That's not the process you're going through. I don't know if you want me to mention this bit actually now.
No, do it. Yeah,
right. Okay.
Yeah,
so
yeah, we can just remind people later.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 3 takeaways that those of you on this call. This is not about sending money to Aching Arms. Okay. This is not why I'm here today. This is not about getting you to fundraise for us. It's about what other things you can do to help. So start a conversation. This is what I always say when I talk at any conferences. I say, simply start a conversation. There will always be someone in your workplace who feels relief that this conversation has started, because there are so many families and employees who quietly suffer in silence, and they don't share that their loss has happened, but it's impacting their everyday. So be a compassionate conversation catalyst is my catchy little alliteration. I know you PR people here, you like things like alliteration. So be compassionate. See if you can start a conversation in your workplace around pregnancy and baby loss and what's happening. Have a look on your intranet. Is there any way you can type in miscarriage and a support agency comes up, or is there actually nothing? So start a conversation, and then you might want to think about being a champion of this. I'm seeing more employee sort of network groups emerging in some of the big organizations who have got these sort of groups around family or parenting or personal experiences. Is there a group in your organization that talks about pregnancy and baby loss so that other employees know who they can go to for support? And can you be an advocate, and really push that there's an EAP with appropriate messaging, that there's appropriate full training in the learning and development team, take it seriously, and that you're willing to advocate, actually, I'm going to represent bereaved parents. Maybe I'm a bereaved parent myself, but what change can take place in our workplace and how can I make that happen? So sort of 3 levels of things you can take away from this session today to think about, depending on your organization, where you feel you could fit into that conversation about pregnancy and baby loss. Yeah, there's I told you there's lots of clicks, Sarah. I've just found that one myself. So these are just some of those things there for you.
You've got a career in internal comms, I'm sure. A wonderful presentation.
So if anyone, obviously, if you need support, anyone on this call today who's has been triggered by this, that's our support email there. So you can text, email, set up on our helpline and phone for support, and that's how you can reach out to us and find more information about Aching Arms or request a bear for yourself. I will stop sharing now. I'm conscious I probably spoke for far too long there. Sorry. I can talk all day about it.
Thank you so much for opening up the discussion in such a gentle and kind way. There's lots of things that I'm going to be taking back to my organisation. I work for a very large organisation, so I'm sure that there are some things that we could be doing there. So thank you so much, Leanne. As I said before, if you've got a question and you want to remember to ask it, please pop it in the chat. And in the meantime, we're going to hear from Ed about the other end of the spectrum, the sort of end of life rather than beginning of life. So thank you. Over to you, Ed.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, thanks, Leanne and Alenka. Just some really interesting kind of perspectives from you guys. I know, Leanne, that you mentioned about doll therapy within dementia care. It's a really well-researched area. And interestingly, I've never found that route that you were actually talking about in the back of that age group that is coming into care, that they were just expected to go home and try again, as you put. But I hadn't found that was that's what had happened or what was happening back then. Doll therapy is incredibly powerful, and I fully understand where that fits. And a lot of we see people come into our care. A lot of this information is often lost in time. So where we see distress behaviour, where we don't always find what's triggered it, topics of conversation and discussions like this are really interesting for me to take away and explore a little bit further. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up, and it's something I'm sure I'll reach out to you and just discuss a little bit more on. So yeah, if I'm waffling, someone put their hand up and just go, yeah, so that I know. I do waffle a little bit. Well, I think I do anyway. Well, I'm doing it now. Yeah, so I focus a lot of our care of people coming into our service through my studies, where I've been studying now for 4 years. It seems a lot longer. I qualified in 2017 as a registered mental health nurse, and only 2 days in the 3-year degree did we touch on dementia. I came out with an expectation of myself being an expert. Now I can carry a label to a certain degree and try and get myself that label to stick, but it was really quick that I needed to further my knowledge. So I've been in education since. I'm just about to write my dissertation on professional versus son. So Dad was diagnosed in June 2023 with Alzheimer's, but frontal lobe atrophy, which is your work engine, basically. It's how you think, and so he was an accountant, and it's a massive part of what his identity is. And he's unable now to kind of plan and sequence anything really that's too strenuous. So a lot of who he is has been compartmentalized a little bit. But I'll just in a little bit, I'll just talk about the importance of trying to unravel that box, to find personhood, to pull it out, to be able to kind of interact with people towards the ender stages of the disease. But just some kind of scene setting, if you like, around prevalence of dementia and diagnosis. When you get to around about 80, 75, 80 years old, at 80 years old, it jumps from 3% to 18% chance of getting dementia. So the longer we live, where health and wealth is over a 200-year period, our life expectancy back in 1810 was due to was around about 40 years old. But through industrial revolution, medicine revolution, just healthier living, we've now got a rough age expectancy, a life expectancy of around 84, 8 to 86. So you can start to see where the numbers start to boom. And because we're living longer, we have an aging population. But the point that I'm kind of just focusing people on at the moment, particularly around today's talk, is the real impact that dementia diagnosis has on our aging population, because of the lot of people that are in care before coming into nursing care or residential care are cared for by an unpaid workforce or an informal carer, as some of us are already doing, without possibly even recognizing that we are a stat of that number. and the average working week for an unpaid carer that is the primary carer is 100 hours a week. So it's an incredibly stressful time in someone's life when their partner or loved ones received a dementia diagnosis. They're then given this metaphorical contract of work of 100 hours a week. And when the average age of that person is anywhere between 75 and 90. And you start to then really break down the actual real impact that diagnosis has on the person, but also the dynamics around that person. And the higher the number of people living with dementia climbs, the higher the number of the unpaid workforce climbs, and their age expectancy is only increasing. So you've got this huge amount of pressure of hours and expectation of delivery of care as a carer, labelled as a carer, and when you shouldn't be. No one should work 100 hours a week. Let me just get that straight. But particularly at the later stage of your life, because I've done dementia quality of life assessments, carers, and the first question on a lot of those dementia quality of life assessments are, how is your physical health? Now, for someone that's working 100 hours a week at that age, your physical health is going to be poor. The next question set around mental health, and how is your mental health? And it's dependent on the assessment tool you use. It's very good, and just straightforward kind of outcome questions. They all come back bad. Like the response to the assessments are, I am struggling. I cannot do this, and that's physical, mental health. And the touch on the mental health is that whilst they're trying to physically battle through this period of their life, what's happening in front of them is that they're losing the person that they know. So there's two huge stress factors to exactly what's going on in a diagnosis around identity. And one thing that I always like to just kind of bring to discussions, when I was writing a paper last year, I was looking at focusing on identity and what really happens and what identity is and who we are as individuals. And identity is built from birth. And previous to that, through parenting, is that you start setting an identity of your child before birth, and you once you get to the point of, let's just say, a hypothetical age of 80, and the husband has a diagnosis of dementia, and day-to-day living tasks are starting to become really difficult, the partner takes on a role of carer, and it's misdirected labeling of, you're a carer now, where actually they've been married for 50, 60 years. And in this research paper, the partner of this gentleman said, I'm not his carer. Stop calling me his carer. I'm his wife. I've been his wife for 60 years. That doesn't go. But within a 15-minute assessment and chat, that individual was stripped of her identity, just like that. And they're the kind of fights that you kind of go up against in where you have this process, and where I'm with Dad, and where we'd identified back in 2020, 2021 that something wasn't quite right, and it wasn't just getting old; it was more underlying issue. And then I kind of set up, right, this is how I'm going to approach it, and you prep yourself. And this is me as a professional in this field, but this is how I'm going to approach it. That doesn't happen, because all of a sudden you get this emotional rush of, that's Dad, and trying to implement a professional approach, it's really, it doesn't work. They don't cross over as neatly as you thought they would, which is really interesting, and it's kind of where I've focused my dissertation around, is the professional versus son, where you manage, where you think you can manage, because I think I'm a good professional, as a professional and an expert in my field, but how this all of a sudden this overwhelming sense of identity kind of overtook the whole situation, in that actually no, I'm son first.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Ed. And
no problem.
I think that for me, that discussion links beautifully back to the previous discussions, which is about the need for us to be individuals and to be recognised for our identity, and the strengths that we bring. I wonder whether so there aren't any questions in the chat at the moment, but if anyone wants to come off camera or raise their hand and ask a question, but I did wonder whether you guys had any questions for each other. I can see you all busy nodding away on each other's presentations.
I didn't actually have anything. There was something that I was going to ask Alenka, but Leanne opened that up with the discussion. I think one thing that I wanted to just raise really quickly was that actually about 5 years ago, we had one of our staff members going through a bereavement, I understood around what she was saying, that there was an element, really heavy element of PTSD that she was experiencing. But I didn't really know where to signpost her, apart from into our local kind of mental health services. So it's like it's refreshing to know that there's someone there that, if I do come about something like this again, which I'm sure I will, we employ nearly 400 people, so at some point it probably will come about. So I'm really glad that a service firstly exists, but secondly is that I know where to go. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah, I thank you, Ed. And I'm really interested to put you in touch actually with somebody. She was a trustee of Aching Arms. She's Dr. Anna Clancy. She's a clinical psychologist, and like you, she's been her experience of her father. He sadly passed away fairly recently, but she works in dementia specialism herself, and he suffered experienced dementia. So I'd be interesting to connect the two of you together.
Yeah, that would be great. I'd really appreciate that.
Yeah, she oversees PhD students at I think out of Lancashire University. So I'd like to connect you with her if there's any support for you.
Absolutely. Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah. And then yeah, really interesting about the doll therapy. There was a specialist mental health nurse who was called to it was actually my brother-in-law's mum, who is living with dementia, and she had a very severe crisis, and the staff in the care home didn't know how to manage it. And it was just by chance they called the regional specialist mental health nurse to attend to her. She knew of Aching Arms because she'd received one of our bears through her own bereavement, and she could see that my brother-in-law's mum had a bear on the side because he'd just given it to her as a comforter, just to have, because she knew about, when she was really well, she knew about the charity starting up. And that was the trigger for her to start a conversation with her about her own pregnancy loss. And actually, Irene calmed right down, and there was a whole conversation around that she had experienced 2 losses, but her children didn't know about 2 losses. Wow. So there was this disconnect between the family, what they knew and what had been secretive, but actually it was a tool to calm her right down. So
yeah, that's incredible.
I think it'd be interesting to talk to you about that. I'm sorry, Sarah, we've hijacked this slightly.
Yeah. In listening to the two of you, it comes back to my original point of shared experiences and creating that environment where people feel safe to say, hang on, I understand what you're going through. Like, I actually understand. It's not just one of those awkward things that managers might feel they need to say. It is creating that safe environment for shared experiences to come to light and to be open and honest and feel safe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm actually just going to close off our discussion with a reflection on what communications professionals do well. Our job often is to find the case studies that bring to light, you know, a piece of policy that doesn't really make much sense if you read it as policy, or a new product that you know is going to be brilliant, but you need a case study of somebody to demonstrate that actually it is going to be life-changing. And I think that this discussion here has done that. We've successfully looked at some of those changes that we're going to experience in life ourselves and supporting our colleagues through as leaders and colleagues and managers. And we've shown a really fascinating deep dive into sort of beginning of life and end of life. So I just, in the 3 minutes that we've got, I would just like to ask each of you to give your one top tip, if anyone's going to take one thing away from this discussion of something that they can do, and then we will close it off. I'm going to go to Alenka first.
Okay. So if I could pick one, I would probably I'd probably say be kind. You don't know what people are facing in their lives, and what might be big, what's big to them might not be big to you, but it's about them. So
Thank you. Leanne.
Mine is start a conversation, please. Have a conversation in your workplace, whether it's over coffee or lunch, and just say what's happening in terms of pregnancy and baby loss in our workplace. Is there support? Do we talk about it enough? So start a conversation, see where it leads.
Thank you. And Ed.
Yeah, so it's just focusing really around maintaining identity through a dementia diagnosis, and build and plan ahead. Aging doesn't have to be scary, but just change the way you approach and focus on what can be done rather than what can't be done.
Brilliant. That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for all of your time, and we will look forward to doing another one of these again on maybe a cheerier topic, but I know that today has been incredibly valuable, so just a massive thank you for your honesty and openness.
thank you, Sarah.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you,
Take
Sarah.
care.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye bye. Bye bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.